Hi, I'm Colleen. Let's do a June wrap up. Hi, I'm Colleen Delaney. If it's your first time here, welcome to my channel. I talk about books and writing. Today we're going to do a June wrap up, but before I start, in the description, as always, there's going to be a link to sign up for my newsletter where you get some early reviews and a lot of writing news from me. I'm also going to put a link in the description for my newest release, Finding His Mate, which is a spicy paranormal romance novel. And I'm currently, for like the next literally 48 hours, running a sale on one of the books I wrote when I was writing under Lucy Hudson. It's called The Star Spangled Weekend. It is a quick, spicy yet cozy romance novella that takes place on a long weekend over the 4th of July. And since that's this week, I figured I'd run a deal on it. Sorry if you're getting this video a little late. I meant to put this out a couple days ago. I don't know where you are in the world, but where I am, it is so hot today. And now we're getting like thunderstorms every once in a while, so you might hear some really big booms of thunder. I apologize. So, what did I read in June? I read 11 books in June after telling myself I was going to read less than 8. So I did read a lot, and I'm also like way behind on my writing and editing. I can't imagine those two things are related. But I had a really weird month. Not weird month. I read like some stuff that I loved that I would say is like new favorite books, and then I read some stuff that was just like not for me at all. So it's going to run the gamut. I did read so much romance. Like so much romance. I think I read 8 romances. We're going to find out in a minute because we're going to start with romance. So the first book I read in June, I literally finished on June 1st, is Even If the Sky is Falling. And that's an anthology of short romance stories. And it's by Taj McCoy, Cherish Reed, Sarah Smith, Denise Williams, Lane Clark, and Farrah Heron. And I think I got everybody, but let me just check. I did. So this takes place during sort of like false alarm that the world is ending. We're in the like near future, and asteroids are occasionally falling out of the sky, and there's this alarm that's supposed to let you know if they're going to be falling near you, and you're supposed to take shelter in a basement or whatever for, I think it's like 24 hours. And this alarm goes off accidentally. And then each author tells a story about what people are doing during it. And I really enjoyed it. And I don't read a lot of romance anthologies, but I really liked this one a lot. I thought it was a fun premise how they wove them together. They're all obviously contemporary stories. And I really liked all the authors' different voices. I had read Cherish Reed before, obviously. I love her books. I'd read Sarah Smith before. I like her books a lot. And I think that's everybody who I had read before. I can't remember now. But I thought that the collection worked really well together. My favorite story was Cherish Reed's, which is obvious. It was always going to be. There was no chance it was going to be someone else's. But I really liked Sarah Smith's too. So if you are looking for something fun to read like over a weekend, lots of little like snippet type romance, I really recommend it. The second book I read was Irish Goodbye by Katie Hunter. This is the second book in the McGuire series. I read the first one, Love Ireland, a couple months ago. I can't remember, maybe May, maybe April. I'm not remembering exactly which month I read it in. These are celebrity romances. So the premise in this one is like a modern take on ghosting, which I really enjoyed. So you find yourself broken up with by the famous person you dated. And not just broken up with, they send you a text breaking up with you, and then they block you on every single platform and clear out your bank account. Or did they? And the story goes from there. And I really liked it because I'm not usually like a miscommunication trope person, but I thought it worked so well in this story. And if you like celebrity romance with like an Irish twist or like even like a UK twist, I'd really recommend this one. The third romance I read is Papillon. I'm terrible at French, even though I took it for, I don't know, 8 years, a very long time, but it's the French word for butterfly by Sonia Palermo. And this has some pretty heavy content warnings that I would recommend checking out before you read this book. But it's the story basically of a woman who is having the absolute worst day of her life and is thinking about maybe she shouldn't continue on, and then meets this man who turns out to be an immortal being who has been watching her entire life. And then we follow them over the next few days and their relationship. And it's like a heavy fantasy whirlwind romance with heavy content warnings. I'm going to say again, you should definitely check them out before reading them. But I really enjoyed the writing style, the pace, and the love story in it. I liked this one a lot. So the next romance I read was Cruel Seduction by Katie Robert, which was an ARC. Almost every single book I've just told you about, I got as an ARC. Those ones are all out right now. Cruel Seduction is not out yet. It comes out August 8th, I believe is the correct date. Yeah, August 8th. And this is the 5th book in the Dark Olympus series. Yes, it is the 5th book. Okay. I didn't read anything about what this was going to be about before I requested the ARC, because I just saw that the new Dark Olympus was coming out. I was like, request. So I thought, going into this was an enemies to lovers Aphrodite Hephaestus story. And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of good. It sort of is, but it's really not that at all. This is a polyamorous story. So you have 4 narrators. You have Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Adonis, and Pandora. It's hard to talk about this without minor spoilers for book 4. So I'm going to give some minor spoilers for book 4 that I don't think would ruin the book. But we end book 4 with like a huge something that I'm not going to say. And we begin book 5 with Aphrodite and Hephaestus having to make a political marriage even though they hate each other. Aphrodite has recently broken up with Adonis, who was like the love of her life, but she needed to marry Hephaestus for like work. I mean, it's like, these are like mafia romance stories. So for work. And Hephaestus has this other family, which Pandora is a part of, and they've been best friends forever. And so they're like foster siblings and have been raised together. Okay, so here's the thing. I did not love 4 narrators. So I really enjoyed Wicked Beauty, which is the 3rd book in this series, and it's the love story of Helen, Achilles, and Patroclus. So it's a 3-person narrator, a 3-person love story, and I really enjoyed that one. I actually still think that's the best one in the series. I didn't really like this one as much. If you watch my review for Wicked Beauty, which was now like months and months and months ago, I talked about how I don't think I'd ever read someone who wrote everyone being equally loved and in love so well as Katie Robert did in that book. I didn't get that same from this. I felt like people felt kind of left out of like the love aspect, not like the physical aspect, but like the love, if that makes sense, which it might not. So I think I've found that like a 3-person love fest is good for me, but a 4-person love fest, it's just too many people for me. So you learn something. Obviously, I'm still going to read the next book. And she released on Instagram all the books that are coming out. And I can't remember the title of it right now, but there's going to be a Minotaur Ariadne one. That's the one I want to read the most. There's also like plot to this that's not anything to do with their love story. And it's like people are trying to murder members of the 13, and Aphrodite and Hephaestus are both members of the 13. And that's like a whole big plot. There's like a big overarching political plot going on through the entire series. That's what's happening in this one. Obviously, I'm more interested in the love stories. Now let's finally pick up a book I didn't read on my Kindle. I read In a Jam by Kate Canterbury. Oh my gosh. Is this my new favorite contemporary romance of all time? Because it might be. I loved this book so much. It was so good. Okay. We open with Shay getting jilted at the altar. It's literally page 1. And she's a mess, obviously, and she can't believe this is happening. But she's also sort of like understands it because were they ever even love? Okay. Then we jump forward, and her step-grandmother, basically, has died and has left Shay her tulip farm in her will. And it's in Rhode Island in this like really, really small town called Friendship. Shay lived there when she was a teenager. She lived with this woman when she was a teenager and went to high school there. So in the will, though, it says that Shay has 1 year to get married. And if she doesn't, then she doesn't get to inherit the farm. Her life's a mess, so she decides, whatever, I'm just going to go live there for a year. I'm obviously not going to get married. The person I was supposed to marry just left me at the altar. And she gets there, and her high school best friend, who's always held like a insane secret love for her, Noah, is her neighbor, and they reconnect. And after a while, he's like, why don't we just get married? And then you can keep your tulip farm. And then after a while, we can get divorced and it's fine. And he also has custody of his niece. And it was just such a good story. It was so good. When I first got it in the mail, I was a little concerned because it's kind of long for a romance novel. I mean, not that long. It's like 450 pages, but it's really heavy. So I was like, oh my gosh, is this going to be just one of those books I can't get through? I flew through this book. I loved it. It was beautiful. If you want to read a Hallmark movie, but like very spicy, like not like a run-of-the-mill medium steam. Like this is very, very, very hot. This is your book. This is your book. Because I kept thinking the entire time, I was like, I would watch the heck out of this as a Netflix series. Netflix would have to edit the spicy scenes because they're way too spicy for Netflix. They're way too spicy for HBO Max. They're like super, super spicy. But I love this book. I loved it so much. Okay, this book I never know what genre to put these in. But I'm putting it in romance because I don't have any other graphic novels this month. And it was Lore Olympus Volume 4. As you know, I love these. They are beautifully illustrated graphic novels about Hades and Persephone falling in love. I do have to say, this was my least favorite of the series so far, partially because these are like a crazy slow burn. I am on book 4, and they have not kissed. And so for me, I'm like, oh my God, I don't usually read slow burns. This is the slowest slow burn ever. And legit halfway through, Persephone says something like, can we just take things slow? Things are going so fast. I was like, what are you talking about? Are you reading the same romance I am? But they're still very beautiful. Obviously, I'm still going to keep reading. Obviously, I'm still going to pre-order book 5. Obviously, I'm going to buy all of them until they're done because I love the artwork style and the story. But I do wish that maybe we could like begin the romance. Right now, it's a lot of like holding hands and like Hades giving her his jacket to stay warm. Okay, so lastly, I read 2 romances that were firmly like not for me. They were too dark. They were like paranormal fantasy romances that were way too dark for me to enjoy, but I'll still tell you the titles. They were The Ogre's Pet by Cassandra Cross and Trapped by the Wolf by Juno Blake, and they were both books where I felt like the heroes were just way too villainous for me. I don't mind a hero that's got like shades of gray, but these were like straight up bad creatures because they're not human, bad creatures. And I read them back to back, and it was just very like, what am I doing? So they weren't for me. They might be for you or someone else if you're looking for something really dark. Let's switch to contemporary fiction. The first one is Banyan Moon by Tao Tai. And oh my gosh, I loved this book so much. And this is one of the reasons I love Book of the Month. I had not heard about this book at all. And then saw it and was like, oh, that sounds like a good book. And it was phenomenal. So it's the story of 3 women, a grandma, a mom, and a daughter. And the daughter's an adult now, though. And you switch between the 3 of them as narrators. With the grandma, Min, you're in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and you're following her in her young adulthood and her heartbreak and meeting her husband, having her children, and then eventually leaving Vietnam to come to the United States. And then Hyung, I think is how you say the mother's name, her narration is mostly during like the 90s, living in Florida, about her relationships and her relationship with her mother, with her daughter, with her ex-husband, and her story is the saddest in my opinion. And then lastly, you're with Anne, who lives in Michigan now, and she comes home to Florida after the death of her grandmother, which is right at the beginning, that's not a spoiler, and is living in the house that she grew up in, which is this enormous house that they call Banyan House. She's got a lot of hard stuff going on in her life. So it's basically the story of these women, their relationships with each other and the relationships they have with men. I thought it was really beautiful. And if you like generational stories, definitely pick this one up. It was great. Next, I read The 5-Star Weekend by Ellen Hilderbrand. And I love this book. It was really good. I read The Hotel Nantucket last June. And I think I have to read an Ellen Hilderbrand every June because it was just like such a perfect summer read to begin the summer with. So in this one, we have Hollis. And right away, this is not a spoiler, her husband dies suddenly. And she's a mess. She is kind of internet famous. She is one of those people who like had a cooking show that took off during the pandemic. And now she's kind of famous. And she doesn't have a great relationship with her daughter. and she feels a mess. She reads this article online about how you should go on a 5-star weekend where you pick your best friends from different stages of your life and then treat them all to a weekend. So it's like her best friend from childhood, who she went to grade school and high school with, her best friend from college, her best friend from her early motherhood days. So it's like her late 20s, 30s, and then her best friend from middle age. So she picks her best friend from childhood, her best friend from college, and her best friend from her early motherhood days. But she doesn't really have like a new best friend, but there's this random woman who she knows online because they've talked via like her cooking blog. And she decides to invite that woman. And she treats them to a weekend in Nantucket, it's a weekend in Nantucket, where she grew up but doesn't live anymore. And it's beautiful. Okay, Ellen Hilderbrand is really good at the following things. Food description, fantastic. Place description. You feel like you're in Nantucket. I've never been there, but like now that I've read 2 of her books that are set there, I do feel like I'm there. And she like pokes fun at herself in this book, which I thought was pretty funny. There's a lot of drama that happens. It like, there's her high school best friend and her college best friend hate each other. They're the only two that know each other because they met at her wedding. And everybody else is kind of like, can feel the tension. Her best friend from her late 20s and 30s is like really awkward and just wants people to like her. And then the woman who shows up is like a whole nother thing, the other woman. And her daughter also narrates for a little while, and I liked her daughter's part in it too. It was a fantastic read. It made me want to do this. They're all like 50s, I think. And I was like, I just turned 40. Maybe in 10 years, I'll be in a place where I can treat my best friends to a vacation in Nantucket. It sounds awesome. And lastly, lucky number 11, I read She Started It by Cian Gilbert. This is a thriller about a group of women named, let's see if I can remember their names, Tanya, Chloe, Esther, and Annabelle. And they were really good friends in middle school and high school. And they all get invited to a bachelorette party on a private island in the Caribbean, they're from England, by Poppy, who is the girl they made life horrible for in high school. And they decide to go. Okay. I didn't love this book. I thought this book was okay because it's a book about horrible people. Like to the point that I felt like they weren't really believable. Like I know people are awful, especially in high school, but I felt like they were all so horrible that I didn't really find it believable because of that. And it's just a story about horrible things happening to horrible people. I also guessed the twist at literally like 25% in. I was like, oh, I think I know what happened, like really quickly. And so that made it a little bit more like, I don't know, like, okay, I know what happened. Okay. So, but I wouldn't say it's like a bad thriller. I read it really fast. It's got that Caribbean island vibe. If you want to read a vibey thriller like that, it's got a very cool cover. I was thinking if you're a person who like loves pink and like really wants like a pink theme on your bookcase, this would be a good one to add because the pink in it is very good. So those are all the books I read. Huge gamut to like new favorites to like not for me's. What was the best book that you read in June? And what book are you most excited to read in July? I started a lot of books in June that I didn't finish, and I started a lot of books in May that I'm not going to talk about in this video. I talked about them on my TBR video for July. But if you have a book you're super excited about for July or a book that you read in June that was just like absolute perfection, please put it in the comments. If you want to let me know you made it this far in the video without writing words, throw me a storm cloud emoji because I'm legit. I'm looking at a window right now and it's just getting darker and darker. We're going to get a wild summer storm, which I love wild summer storms. They're fantastic, in my opinion, for writing and plotting and reading. So I know exactly what I'm going to do after I'm done with this. As always, I hope you are in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. I'll see you soon.